Hello everyone, I'm Bob Ward, a principal architect on the Azure Data team. Welcome to the Data Platform Summit in 2022. I'm so honored to be back again with all of you. This conference has such a wide variety of speakers and topics from Microsoft and the community. I know you will learn something new and interesting this week. Today, we would like to talk to you about creating a data culture. We would like to show you how the Intelligent Data Platform and SQL Server 2022 can help you transform your business. So to begin, I'd like to ask Buck Woody, a principal data scientist in the Azure Data team, more about this. Buck, what are you seeing with customers for their main data needs?
Bob, it's interesting that you asked that. Data problems have shifted. It used to be an issue of having the right data. Now it's a matter of finding and using the data effectively. In a recent case, a supplier heard from her local store clients where they have a specialty food section that she supplies. Now she's experiencing some supply chain issues like everyone else, and she needs to figure out how to get the right products to the right stores as they're running out quickly and on demand. Sometimes she needs to change the routes real time if she's able to do that. So businesses have spent a great deal of time locating and collecting operational data. The realities of an organization's data estate include an increase of what we collect, how we collect it, and the amount of data complexity. And that makes creating an enterprise knowledge graph seem insurmountable. Today, we generate data far faster than we're able to understand and effectively use it. That's the main challenge. In fact, IDC predicts that by 2025, just a few years from now, the world's data will climb to 175 zettabytes. And 1 zettabyte is a billion terabytes, Bob. Without the right people, processes, and capabilities in place, it can be difficult to answer questions that are just fundamental, like what data do we have? Is it trustworthy? Are people getting the data they need to make the right decisions? Are they getting the data fast enough? Are we managing that data in a regulatory compliant way? It's not just a tools, software, or technology issue. It's about creating a data culture in the organization, one where everyone is aware of the data sources they have, how data can be used, and how data should be protected. And as you would expect, the impact of this kind of data culture to an organization is enormous. A Harvard Business Review Analytic Services report found that companies that embrace a data-driven culture experience a 4 times improvement in revenue performance and better customer satisfaction. So getting the right answers to analytic questions is possible when all of your data assets are connected and managed in a cohesive fashion. This is why we're announcing the Microsoft Intelligent Data Platform, the leading cloud data platform that empowers organizations to invest more time creating value rather than integrating and managing their data estate. This platform is made up of capabilities across databases, analytics, and governance that on their own meet specific business needs and already bring a lot of benefits. But together, these help easily evolve your applications to include advanced analytics and intelligence. It's the integration of the products you're already using today to accelerate innovation and achieve agility across our cloud and even across other clouds. We want to remove key points of friction between your data and analytic systems while ensuring your full data estate can be mapped automatically and governed. Now, organizations can analyze large volumes of operational data in near real time with no extraction, transformation, or load processes, ETL pipelines, and no performance impact on transactional workloads with the Intelligent Data Platform. And anyone in the organization, whether they're a data scientist, a data analyst, or domain expert, can access, analyze, and share data. The state we're all aiming for is where we can accelerate the innovation, focusing on what matters most, your business. We want to free up resources to create frictionless customer experiences, transform your products, and empower your employees. We want to achieve agility. We want to pivot faster to respond to dynamic environments with an integrated data platform that adapts to your needs with hybrid and multi-cloud capabilities. Build how you want, deploy where you want, and gain fast, continuous insights. Build on a trusted platform. Deliver data-powered experiences with the security and privacy controls required to innovate with confidence. Azure provides the most comprehensive protection, by the way, for your very valuable business data. Data governance is top of mind for most business leaders today. If as a business leader you don't know where your data is, you don't know what your future is as an organization. Only when you have a complete understanding of your data, what kind of data it is, so you can set appropriate policies at scale, are you able to empower employees in your organization to use your data effectively. And of course, there are urgent compliance needs too. Today, there's more than 200 regulatory updates each day from government and regulatory bodies around the world. It's just hard to keep track. This is why we developed Microsoft Purview, a data governance service that discovers, catalogs, and helps assess compliance exposure across all your on-prem, cloud, and multi-cloud, and even SaaS data. Purview is the only cloud service that lets you map all your data no matter where it resides. It provides the critical information you need to govern data use and assess compliant risks, from on-premises databases to data in other cloud systems to data in your Power BI reports. Purview provides a view of your data estate that previously was impossible. Purview also uses more than 200 classifiers to automatically search for terms and personal information relevant to industry-specific regulations, and it flags what might be out of compliance. And Purview is seamlessly integrated with SQL Server, Azure SQL, Power BI, and Microsoft Information Protection and M365, Azure Synapse, providing you with a consistent data class catalog across all your businesses. Well, customers like Grundfos are seeing incredible value in Purview. They have scanned and classified more than 100 million assets across their data estate and over 16,000 Power BI workspaces to bring the transparency and accelerate data sharing across the org, enabling them to build solutions to help improve the environment in people's lives. Well, now after you've located your data with governance, you often find duplicate sources, systems, and processing for that data. Data modernization and consolidation is often the next step for any successful digital transformation. Migrating and modernizing your application databases allows you to focus on the application, not the database. You no longer have to worry about scaling your applications to meet high demand. Security and management is made simple, and you're always up to date with the latest and greatest database features and patches, irrespective of whether you prefer proprietary or open source databases. We have them all. Microsoft Azure delivers a robust portfolio of operational databases that support all your data, whether it fits neatly into rows and columns or as a collection of image files, video, audio, social sentiments, whatever you have. We're proud to be recognized by leading analysts, Gartner and Forrester, for our leadership in operational databases. Magic Quadrant databases we've had for 8 years running. We've also been named a leader in Forrester's NoSQL and database waves for the last 3 years. Whether it's migrating or modernizing your existing applications, building net new cloud native applications, we've got a database that fits your specific use case and needs. Now, your data culture journey has brought you to a place where you know what data you have and how to find it, and you've optimized that data, storage, and processing with best-of-breed systems. From relational to unstructured data, now it's time to put it to use. You know, as the volume, variety, and velocity, the V's there, of data continue to grow, so does the need to get timely insights. Only Azure provides the scale and performance needed to deliver immediate insights on your business at incredible value. No other cloud analytics service comes close to Azure Synapse Analytics price performance point. Not any other provider. What Azure Synapse Analytics provides is it combines data integration, big data, and data warehousing capabilities into one unified service. It offers the most robust set of security capabilities of any cloud analytics vendor, protecting your most valuable data. It's the only analytics solution on-prem or in the cloud to compete and complete industry standard performance benchmarks at petabyte scale. Other offerings really just don't come close to this. It can scale to support tens of thousands of concurrent users. Other systems run into trouble around 100 concurrent users. It also enables real-time insights by accessing your operational data stored in Cosmos DB or SQL Server with Synapse Link. The Synapse Link is the first cloud-native implementation of HTAP, Hybrid Transactional Analytic Processing, with no data movement required from your operational stores and places no burden on your transactional systems. No other cloud vendor offers that capability. And of course, it's deeply integrated with Power BI, the undisputed leader in self-service business intelligence. Power BI delivers impactful insights through stunning visualizations. The combination of Azure Synapse and Power BI is simply unmatched in the market. And according to Forrester's Total Economic Impact Study, can deliver a 271% ROI over a 3-year period. Take, for example, Walgreens, which recently migrated from a legacy Teradata appliance and relies on Azure Synapse for its analytics. They immediately saw a 3 times performance increase at 1/3 of the cost. A clear sale, a fraud protection service provider, was able to speed time to insights from 1 week to 6 hours with Azure Synapse. Co-op in the UK is able to shorten time to insights, running queries against data from over 2,000 stores in mere minutes. What used to take days is now accomplished in minutes. Electrolux is using Azure Synapse and Power BI to empower everyone in their organization with insight. They can now analyze data on dimensions, all the dimensions, and what used to take 3 days now takes 10 minutes. Well, Bob, I've been talking a lot here about this platform and the components. Let's take a look at a scenario where we'll just put all this together. We'll use the example of the supplier I mentioned at the beginning and see if we can use Intelligent Data Platform to help her locate transport data in all her systems, do some analytics on it, show where everything is, and even help her visualize it near real time. Let's take a look. So let's take a look at how our CEO can achieve near real-time analytics, integrating operational data with analytics using the Intelligent Data Platform. Now, I've deployed a Synapse workspace with a SQL dedicated pool to store our CEO's operational data from SQL Server. Now we'll use SQL Server to synchronize to Synapse. So I've got a SQL Server 2022 instance deployed on a system here at her company. I've restored a database. We'll use wide world importers as an example of data so that we can link that to the Synapse system. You can see here in SQL Server Management Studio the various types of tables that are available to synchronize. I've also modified wide world importers and added a few new tables that include things like vehicles and stock items. This represents those products that are stored in vehicles tracked over various cities in her company's data. One of the things we need to do to set up Synapse Link for SQL Server is to provide connection information to Synapse about where all that data lives. So this represents a connection to SQL Server called the linked service and something called a landing zone where data will temporarily be stored and ingested into Synapse. Before we link our data from SQL Server to Synapse, we'd like to do some exploration of that data. Purview integration allows us to do that. Purview can scan our SQL Server database and find information, such as the database, is it certified to use in our organization for analysis, and so on. We get information such as who's the owner of the database and who are the experts for us to ask questions as we decide which tables we need to link. As we explore further, we can look at what schemas exist to discover even more tables. We see here in the sales schema there's a customers table. We'd like to know more about it, and Purview has a rich exploration of metadata, such as the classifications that exist for the table, so that we can make sure we're following proper compliance in our organization. We can go further to find out which classifications match to specific columns in this customers table. In addition, just like the database, we can find who the owner of the table is, so we can make sure we're compliant and ask more questions about it. We'd like to look at more than just the vehicles table, but we don't know what schema it's in. So we can go back to Purview and search, type in the word vehicles, and look at the category of information and the catalog about that object. Just like the databases and other tables, we can see who the owner of the table is as well. This is an example of Purview integration with Synapse and SQL for governance. Now it's time to synchronize our data from SQL Server to Synapse. We can do all of this inside Synapse Studio. Let's set up a link connection and choose the source tables from SQL Server that we'd like to synchronize to target tables inside Synapse. We specify our SQL Server, which we set up earlier, and our target SQL database in the setups itself. And we also specify the landing zone that we built earlier on an Azure storage account, which holds data temporarily to be ingested inside the Synapse workspace. With this synchronization now started, we can then go monitor the status of the data being synchronized to SQL Server and Synapse using Synapse Studio. We can drill in further, and we can see the status of the various tables that were set up from SQL Server and how they're being replicated into the Synapse system. Now that our data is synchronized, there we go, let's go explore this data inside Synapse Studio itself. These represent the various tables that have been synchronized from SQL Server into Synapse, SQL tables, and dedicated pools. We can even write a SQL script inside Synapse Studio and query that data right away in Synapse. Here we see a script to do a simple calculation of what is the cargo count across our vehicles in various cities, and we can see a small tabular result of that data. Now, Power BI is very easily integrated with Synapse, so we are able to generate a simple report just based on the data itself to look at a map of the cargo counts across cities across the state of Texas. Now let's make some changes in SQL Server and see them reflected near real time in Synapse. Connected to SQL Server, we just create a script to insert a random number of cargo items across vehicles across various cities. Let's now see the data reflected inside Synapse using Synapse Studio in the same cargo count script. We can see our new cargo counts across these cities in various states, or even use the basic charting capabilities in Synapse to see the data more graphically. Now, since Power BI is integrated with Synapse, reports automatically reflect the changes. The color of the circles, by the way, represents the size of the cargo counts across cities. This is the power of the Intelligent Data Platform. These capabilities take your operational data and use it in Synapse for near real-time analytics. It's taking the governance of Purview and integrating it with databases and Synapse for cataloging and exploration of data. And it uses the capabilities of Power BI to see rich visualizations to help drive a data culture and answer analytic questions.
Buck, what a perfect lead-in to talk about SQL Server 2022, the most cloud-connected version of SQL Server in our history. Let's dive in to the capabilities of SQL Server 2022. I call this my Wheel of Power slide because if you think of SQL Server 2022 at the hub, the spokes represent the major categories of new features in SQL Server 2022. And it starts with being cloud connected in ways we've never even dreamed before. We're going to dive into some of those today. We'll talk about built-in query intelligence, getting faster with no code changes, taking what we've done in previous versions of SQL Server and going even farther. And we have to innovate in the meat and potatoes of SQL Server for security, scalability, and availability. You'll hear about some of those stories today. We want to continue to enhance the journey of data virtualization, but also introduce new capabilities to use things like S3 object storage. And then finally, we want to talk about T-SQL, our language we believe is very important to developers and to you. And we're going to show you that we've not forgotten about you. We continue to enhance the T-SQL language. We'll talk some about that today. So let's dive into the cloud connectivity story. And you can see here from this chart, this slide, look at all this amazing functionality. Look at us connecting to Azure services in ways we've never even thought of before, to managed instances, to Synapse, to Purview, using Azure Active Directory, and ensuring we continue that great story of integrating with Microsoft Defender. And we're going to use services in your environment like Azure Arc Agents or distributed availability groups or even a self-hosted runtime to make that connection seamless and easy for you to connect your data to the cloud. Let's dive into some of these very quickly and see what challenges that you may face today and what solutions these cloud connectivity options can provide for you. You know, I've met a lot of customers over the years with SQL Server, and none of them say that setting up disaster recovery is easy. You know, SQL Server has all the capabilities to do disaster recovery, but you have to own it, set it up, configure, maintain it. And what about scenarios where somebody sets it up for you and leaves the company and doesn't document what they did? What are you going to do to ensure that DR is proven for your business? Well, we've introduced with SQL Server 2022 the ability to connect to Azure SQL Managed Instance to give you managed disaster recovery. We're going to use the power of built-in distributed availability groups within SQL Server 2022 to make your managed instance now a failover partner. So you can set it up just like you would do a DAG, you can seed your data, and then any changes you make in SQL Server 2022 are automatically replicated to managed instance. Now, once maybe you're ready to fail over, an event has occurred, or you need to actually fail over, you fail over to managed instance. That now becomes your primary to use. And then when you're ready to go back, you could restore a database back to SQL Server 2022. Let me repeat that. Yes, you can restore a managed instance database back to a version of SQL Server 2022. Or as you'll see in our journey as we evolve the software, the ability to fail back just like a true availability group scenario you would do. So I'm really excited to see this technology land. A lot of customers have asked us about this and are very interested to see how managed instance can give you managed disaster recovery. But let's also talk about analytics. We believe Azure Synapse is a very popular option for customers to do analytics. But we understand, though, that today a challenge is for you to get your data from SQL Server to Synapse, it requires ETL. It requires Azure Data Factory, SSS jobs, or something to copy data into Synapse. And the data can often be out of date when you do that. It's not real time. Or running queries on SQL Server or doing these operations can affect your operational workload. So we've introduced Azure Synapse Link for SQL Server. You saw a demonstration of that from Buck earlier in today's presentation. The concept is this. You take Synapse, as Buck showed you, connect it to your SQL Server, and you see the data into Synapse dedicated pools. Now as you make changes into SQL Server, we'll automatically look at the transaction log, harvest those changes, feed them into a landing zone, and then all of a sudden now you'll be able to query your data in SQL pools near real time. And Buck showed you a demonstration of that. And because of the fact you're in Synapse, as you saw earlier, you can connect yourself to all sorts of part of the Azure cloud now, including integrations with Purview and even Power BI for visualization. The setup's easy to do, seamless, and SQL Server handles all the changes being fed into Synapse. Now the third part of this story is Purview. Microsoft Purview is a central hub for governance for all of your assets in the cloud and on premises. And you have the ability with Purview today to catalog your data. As we saw in your demonstration, we did a search of SQL Server data right through Synapse. You can do lineage to look at dependencies for your SQL assets. But what's new for SQL Server 2022 is the ability to do policy management. Imagine a scenario where you have a vendor you've hired to do performance monitoring for, say, 6 months. You can now go into Purview and set up a policy to give that particular person performance monitor rights across all your SQL Server estate with one simple policy declaration. You publish that policy to all the SQL servers. Now, without going directly into them and creating login accounts and authentication, that individual has rights to do performance monitoring. And when that contract is over, you can simply go into Purview and publish another policy to remove those rights. Again, it's a great option and availability capability for you to go in and centralize policies for authentication across many different SQL assets. Well, that's the cloud connectivity story, and it's amazing. Managed Instance, Synapse, Purview, even Azure Active Directory, again, the most cloud-connected version of SQL Server ever. I cannot wait for you to dive in and try these features. But we mentioned also that the second part of our category was built-in query intelligence. You know, we started a journey in SQL 17 and in Azure SQL for intelligent query processing. We also started a journey in SQL 16 for Query Store. We kind of like to bring those worlds together in SQL Server 2022 and go even further for built-in query intelligence. And what we mean by that is taking the query processor built into the SQL Server engine and giving you new capabilities, solving new scenarios for you to make query tuning less expensive for you. So consider this. Query Store is going to be on by default now for new databases. You have Query Store hints to shape plans like Plan Guide, but a much easier way. And there are new intelligent query processing scenarios that can take advantage of the Query Store for feedback scenarios. Consider a degree of parallelism. Who doesn't struggle with max stop today? Wouldn't it be interesting if the query processor could look at execution over time and adjust and lower max stop for a query, achieving the same performance as it did before, but lowering the amount of CPU resources that those queries need, giving more resources for the rest of your workload? That can happen by combining the query processor with the Query Store together in SQL Server 2022. We've also got scenarios where we're going to use the Query Store to look at cardinality estimation problems. CE model problems have plagued folks since 2014. Now we're going to try to make adjustments for you using the Query Store and using query hints to solve those problems. But the one on the right here, which doesn't require the Query Store, built in the query processor, is parameter-sensitive plan optimization. Who has not been plagued with parameter sniffing problems throughout their career with SQL Server? We think we can solve those problems with a new technique to allow multiple execution plans to be cached for the same parameterized statement. This is technology and innovation that no one else has in the industry. So in order to see this in action, I'd like to invite Kate Smith to come in and show you a demonstration of built-in query intelligence in SQL Server 2022.
Thanks, Buck. Thanks, Bob. My name is Kate Smith, and I'm here to show you two new features for intelligent query processing in SQL 22, parameter-sensitive plan optimization and DOP feedback. Let's get started.
So as you can see here, I'm using SQL Server 2022, and I have imported the Wide World Importers database. I've created a stored procedure called Get Stock Items by Supplier that takes as a parameter a supplier ID. The supplier ID is used in a where clause inside the stored procedure. Now, we're going to execute the stored procedure with parameter value 2. When we do so, we get a particular query plan. That query plan includes an index seek. Not only that, but we can look at the overall execution time of the stored procedure with this query plan for parameter value 2, and we get an elapsed time of 27 milliseconds. Now, I'm going to come over to this other window. I'm going to simulate plan cast eviction and re-execute the stored procedure with parameter value 4. When we do this, we get a different execution plan. And in fact, this execution plan has a clustered index scan instead of a seek. You can see them side by side. The new plan also contains some parallelism. So, if we come back to the first window, execute with parameter value 2 again, but using the plan, we'll check here in a second, but we can see it looks like it returns pretty quickly. So let's look at the execution plan, and it is the same plan that we had for parameter value 4. Looks like it did okay performance-wise, but let's look a little closer, and we can see that in fact the elapsed time, compared to 27 milliseconds, this is about 10 times slower. So let's take all of this over to perfmon. in Perfmon, we can keep track of processor time and throughput. I am going to simulate two workloads, the same stored procedure that we were executing before. So the first workload is the index seek workload with the parameter value of 2, and we're going to run this on a number of different threads. The second workload is the one that generates the index scan plan, simulating cache eviction and running with parameter value 4. So let's run the index seek plan, and we can see that it executes and returns in just a few seconds. We can see in Perfmon that we got pretty good throughput. There's a spike, but it's pretty good. And also, we had a spike in CPU, but nothing egregious or troubling. So, we execute the index scan plan, simulating that cache eviction and getting a different plan into the procedure cache. Then we'll run the first workload, the index seek plan workload, parameter value 2 workload. And we can see, oh my goodness. So, first of all, our throughput has dramatically decreased. And second of all, our CPU consumption is sustained. We have sustained high CPU consumption. In fact, it's so sustained and so continuing, we're just going to cancel this execution and kill that out. So why is this happening? If we come here and we actually query the underlying data, we can find for supplier ID 2 that we have about 3 suppliers. But for supplier ID 4, there are millions. And that is why we see such a different plan generated for these 2 different parameter values, as well as such different performance when we run the wrong parameter value with the wrong plan. In SQL Server 2022, with parameter sensitive plan feature, under compatibility 160, we actually kind of address this issue. So let's look at what that looks like for your workload in practice. We've turned those on. We've run that first workload, the index seek plan, and we see that that executes and completes in just a few seconds. We'll run the scan plan, which would, in previous executions, put that other plan in the cache that interfered with this third execution we're going to do of the seek plan workload. But does it actually interfere? No. Again, it executes it in just a few seconds. Let's look at Perfmon, and we see what we kind of would like to see. 2 spikes in throughput and 2 spikes in CPU consumption, but nothing that raises any alarm bells or red flags. Now we can look in the query store at the different query plans for this same stored procedure. Here we can look at the index seek plan. There it is, and there's the stored procedure. We can also click on the same query ID 9, same query ID, same stored procedure, but we have a different plan also in the query store, the index seek plan. And that is parameter sensitive plan optimization. It's really, really cool. Now, let's look at degree of parallelism feedback. I'm going to use the same stored procedure that we were using before. If you recall, when we executed with parameter value 4, we got a plan that not only had an index seek, but it contained some parallelism. In SQL Server, if your server has an available 32 CPUs, then the degree of parallelism of a query can be as high as 32. That's not always optimal for the execution of the query, however. And degree of parallelism feedback will attempt to reduce the degree of parallelism in a safe, do-no-harm way that allows us to find the right degree of parallelism for your query. So let's turn the feature on under compatibility 160, and then this feature will work with the query store to track query performance and find that sweet spot of degree of parallelism. So now I have a simulation of running this same stored procedure over time and the extended events that are generated as we do that. So we figure out this query is eligible for degree of parallelism feedback, and it started with a parallelism of 32. Now, the first thing we do is provide some feedback, and we say, well, maybe we should go down a little and try a degree of parallelism of 20. So we try it, and we validate it. We execute a few times to validate that this feedback is in fact good. Once we feel that that's been validated, we might provide feedback again and say, well, now let's try 16. And we validate, and we continue in this cycle of validating and providing feedback. This time, we're going to try taking our degree of parallelism down to 12. Validate again. And then we get to a point where we provide feedback that says, well, maybe degree of parallelism 8 is better. We find that it's not, and so we revert. We do not actually stick with parallelism 8. We go back to 12, which is our last stable degree of parallelism. Let's look at a timeline of this query's execution in the query store. And here we're tracking the overall duration of query execution. And what you can see is we started out with a fairly long duration, but as we reduced the degree of parallelism, the duration got lower and lower until we reached a fairly low stable state. We can do the same thing, but look at CPU time, overall CPU time. You see the same thing. We started out with a high degree of parallelism, and as we reduced the degree of parallelism, our CPU time went down until we found a good stable state that's much lower than where we started. And that is degree of parallelism feedback.
So there you have it. 2 of the awesome features coming out in SQL 22 in query processing. Back to you guys.
Thanks, Kate. What a great demonstration. Hey, built-in query intelligence. Getting faster, consistent performance with no code changes. This is one of the areas we've done so much innovation in SQL Server 2022. I can't wait for you to download and try out these type of scenarios. Now, the third category of our wheel of power for SQL Server 2022 is the core engine, the meat and potatoes of SQL Server. Think of security, scalability, and availability. Let's talk about some of the highlights of what we've invested in this space, and then focus on one area in particular called Ledger. So if you think about security, it's a very important part of anybody's deployment of SQL Server. So we'll talk about Ledger in a second, a blockchain for SQL, but we've also made other investments for security, including enhancing Always Encrypted, our end-to-end encryption functionality, and beefing up connection encryption to give you a much more reliable, more secure connection, including supporting new versions of TLS. In the area of scalability, we've added things like buffer pool parallel scan to give you better performance on very large memory systems for operations like creating databases or backing them up. And then about hands-free TempDB. What do I mean by that? Imagine a world where latch contention just no longer exists for TempDB. We've shored up almost all the latching contention problems you've seen in the past that we've built on from SQL 19 now into SQL 2022. So I encourage you to take a look at the fact that maybe latches are forever gone for your TempDB system. And then we have things like auto update asyncs concurrency we've enhanced. So things like we don't want background processes to update your stats to block your workloads. And then availability, we have some exciting stuff. Can you imagine now, for the first time, with an availability group, your agent jobs, your logins, your link servers, instance level objects are now part of your availability group and replicated to secondary servers. So excited for you to take a look at that technology. You've been asking it for a very long period of time. We also are supporting the ability to do snapshot backups cross-platform. And what we mean by that is no longer must you need to write a VDI application or use a volume snapshot service to do snapshot backups. It's now infused into the T-SQL language. And then we've partnered with Intel, using their Quick Assist technology to get better compression for your backups, but most importantly to do hardware offloading so that CPU resources can be devoted to your workload versus to all the threads that need to do compressions or uncompressions for your backup. Now let's dive into one of the specific areas of SQL Server 2022 in the engine called Ledger. I've talked to customers today that have looked at the power of blockchain and they want to invest in it. But here's the problem. Blockchain usually requires a distributed system or distributed algorithms. So it's not performant and doesn't have great data management capabilities. But customers still want the ability to have multi-parties trust data without a central authority. So what we've done with SQL is we've come together and married these technologies to bring blockchain into the engine so that a central system can be used to achieve those goals. And we call this Ledger for SQL Server. Let's talk about how it works. So it's very nice because there's no code changes here. You first declare you'd like a ledger table. You do it through T-SQL, a simple extension, in this case an updatable ledger table. When you declare that, anytime you make changes, we automatically build a history of these changes, including auditing who made the change and what time they made the change and what the operation was. And you get a view on top of that altogether. All built in, no code change, it just happens within the engine. Now, in addition, to support the concept of blockchain, we have something called a database ledger. These are a series of system tables inside the database that are recording hashes of the transactions from any of the ledger tables in the database. Think of this as an ability for us to be able to compare and ensure that the data in the tables have not been tampered with. This all happens built into the engine. Now, you would also like the ability probably to have an independent verification of this data. So we have a concept called a digest. Now, a digest is something that's going to be a hash of the blockchain, and you're going to store that in a separate location. We can have the ability for you to automatically store this into Azure. Now, why the digest is important is independent parties can come in and use the digest at any time to verify that the data has not been tampered with. So, built-in auditing, right? Who made the changes, built-in blockchain, and built-in independent verification with a digest. We even have the ability to have something called an append-only ledger table. So if you'd like to set up a scenario where you have a ledger table and you only record inserts, not allowing a DBA to come in and update the data to kind of fudge or fake the data, we support a concept called an append-only ledger table as well. All of this built into the engine, no application changes required, and it includes built-in blockchain technology. So what I'd like to do now is invite Peter Van Hoof to come on and show you a powerful demonstration of Ledger for SQL Server.
Hello everyone, I'm Peter and I'm a program manager in the data platform security team. In today's demo, I will show you how Ledger allows business partners to trust each other's data without central authority. Let me first explain the scenario before we jump into the demo. We have a company called Contoso IC, and that company produces ice cream. They use a supply chain to receive raw dairy goods from multiple parties. Now, the company ships packaged ice cream to various retailers, and they got some complaints. So there has been some food quality and safety issues that was caused by improper temperature storage during the shipment. In the shipments dashboard, we can clearly see that there was an issue with the temperature when Contoso East Shipping was the owner of the product. So you can see this here. We have a temperature of 10 degrees Celsius, which is of course too high for shipping ice cream. Now, the shipping company will get a bad reputation, of course, and is going to tamper with the data to cover things up. Contoso IC now needs to prove that the data that they're using is tamper-proof and can be fully trusted. All right, let's jump into the demo. We have a table called shipments that is used to store all the shipments. And as you can see here, this is a ledger table. Why? Because I've used the syntax with ledger equals on. And to be more specific, it's even an append-only ledger tables because I've specified append-only equals on. Append-only means that we're blocking update and delete statements, so we're only allowing insert statements. Now, the shipment company knows the DBA of Contoso IC, and they've asked that person to manipulate the data, to tamper with that malicious shipment. So what's the DBA is doing? First of all, we're going to fetch the shipment that is out of compliance by executing this query, and we can actually see that shipment ID 380 has a temperature of 10 degrees Celsius, which is too high. Okay, so the DBA is trying to update that shipment by setting the temperature to -1 for that specific shipment ID. And of course, this is not going to work because updates are not allowed for append-only ledger tables. Yeah. The different parties that are involved in these shipments, like the farmer, the shipping companies, the ice cream factory, and so on, they can all verify the database by themselves to be sure that the data can be fully trusted. And to do that, we provide with Ledger a stored procedure, which is called SP verify database ledger from digest storage. So if you execute this stored procedure, we're actually going to verify whether the data can be fully trusted based on the database digests that we stored outside of the database. And as you can see here, the ledger verification successfully verified up to block 0. With this result, we can be 100% sure that nobody has actually tampered with our data and that it can be fully trusted. Okay, back to the DBA. So he tried to modify the data, but it didn't work. And he thinks, oh, okay, let's be smart and let's tamper with the data directly into the pages. So we're avoiding the ledger technology here. Now, what that person has done, he wrote a stored procedure to update the page directly. So that's the stored procedure. 380, that's my mistake. That should be 6222. Page ID. All right, so when we run this select statement again, you can now see that we don't have any shipment that is out of compliance. So the DBA thinks, oh, okay, this worked, right? Okay, but now let's verify the database again by executing the same stored procedure. And what we can see now is that the ledger verification actually failed. And the reason is that the computed hash from shipment and the associated history table does not match the hash persisted in the database ledger transactions for one specific transaction 1569. So if we go here and verify in the transaction table, transaction 1569, then we can see that, okay, there has been tampered with shipment ID 80, and yeah, indeed, the temperature is now set to -1. Now, with that verification stored procedure, and when it returns a failure, it means that we are 100% sure that somebody has tampered with our data and that it cannot be trusted. As you have seen, Ledger is all about having cryptographic proof that your data has not been tampered with and can be fully trusted. Thanks for watching, and back to you guys.
Thanks, Peter. What a cool demonstration. Ledger is such an innovative technology. I can't wait to see the kind of solutions Ledger is going to bring to companies that have never thought of SQL providing that type of capability. So let's end today's discussion. We're talking about the last two categories for SQL Server 2022 in our Wheel of Power. The first of those is data virtualization. Now, we have started a journey of data virtualization back in 2016 with Polybase, and we extended that functionality in 2019, supporting things like ODBC drivers. And the concept is that you want to access data on separate systems without copying the data in a SQL Server, running queries in SQL to just go get the data, and let it live where it exists, running all SQL queries. Now, what we've heard from our customers, though, is that they want to be able to access more modern object storage systems with the same type of technology. And thus is born REST API-based data virtualization in SQL Server 2022. Now, you're probably familiar with these concepts: open row set, creating external tables. You may not know what CTOS is, which is creating an external table as a select statement. Those type of T-SQL interfaces are supported inside the SQL engine. What we're doing now, though, inside the engine, not relying on Polybase services, is supporting REST APIs, HTTP protocols, to access Azure Blob Storage, Azure Data Lake, or even S3 compatible providers. So once T-SQL queries are run against these connectors, look at the range of type of data, Parquet, Delta, CSV you can access natively, and then look at the kind of providers you can go after now. Your ability now to access data of different formats and different files is almost limitless. And for example, you mentioned CTOS. How about the ability to create a Parquet file in one of these providers based on a query from SQL Server? That's a technology that's existed in Synapse, and we're bringing that to SQL Server 2022. So as we built this functionality, we thought to ourselves, hey, S3 is a very popular object storage system for a lot of different companies across these different providers. Why don't we just support backup and restore? And we're doing that now. So not just data virtualization, but you can take your SQL Server native backups and back them directly into S3 or restore them from those providers. So I'm really excited to see where this technology lands. A lot of these partners you see here today are very excited to see as their customers can start using SQL Server in new and innovative ways. The final piece of the Wheel of Power is T-SQL. So you as a developer today want to make sure you can get the power of functionality and capabilities, but you want to learn all sorts of different languages to do that. Like, why can't T-SQL just do things that I needed to do on the server side? So look at this lineup. We have extended T-SQL probably in this release more than we've done in several different releases and put a lot of investment here. Consider JSON. We're new innovative ways to process JSON data all stored in SQL Server. And then look at this lineup of T-SQL surface area functionality. A lot of this is built on the need to make sure we're ANSI compatible, but also to meet some things we've seen out there from the competition of functionality inside the T-SQL language that you as a developer need. And then finally, look at time series. You have time series data functionality in Azure SQL Edge. We're bringing that into SQL Server itself. So you may have time series-based data that you're processing, IoT data, and you'd like to store that in SQL Server and use functions like this to do time series type processing with it. I'm very excited to see the fact that we continue to invest in T-SQL because it is the most popular query language in the world, and very important to you because you have a skill set here that you want to keep, and you want to keep making sure that your application can take advantage of functionality built into the server. Buck, can you believe this? What a power-packed lineup in SQL Server 2022. There's so many things today we talked about I don't think customers even know exist in this new release.
Well, that's amazing, Bob. All the things that you're showing us in SQL 2022, it's just there's just so much there. And of course, the Intelligent Data Platform may be new to a lot of folks. Now, besides the great sessions that are at this wonderful conference that we're in, do we have a set of resources maybe we can point people to where they could go learn more?
Yeah, Buck, there sure is. Check out this slide. Look at all the resources we are providing you to dive into SQL Server 2022. It could be our main website to find everything about SQL Server 2022, or it could be the fact you want to quickly just go download the bits right now and try trying it out. Maybe you want to see some PowerPoint presentations we've done on SQL Server 2022, and those are available for you to present to your customers and to your colleagues. And then maybe you want to find out all the new details of what's new in SQL Server 2022. So we have a pointer here also for the documentation to quickly see those fine details of a feature you've been looking for. Maybe we'll try some demonstrations today. We have a GitHub repo. We have quick demos for you to see all these different type of features in action based on using the current public preview today. And then you want to watch technical deep dives. There's a Microsoft Mechanics video where we go over some of these and we show you more demonstrations. And as well, don't forget about Data Exposed. We've been on Data Exposed several times talking about SQL Server 2022, and we will continue to do that. Thank you all for attending today. We hope you will enjoy the rest of your time watching the great presentations and great speakers at the Data Platform Summit in 2022.